Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Medical Myths. And I don't know where Phoebe went. Anyway, while I wait for my special guest to come back, it's time for another episode of Medical Myths, the show where we talk about what not to do with your body. And today we're going to talk about personality tests and kind of why they are a problem. I know a lot of people have been wanting to use these personality tests, especially for things like job hiring. Also, there are things online with gifts you can buy for people of certain personality types and such things. So it's kind of a big part of our society right now to be using these. And Phoebe, are you going to join the stream? Oh, okay. Phoebe. Okay, while I wait for my special guest to join the stream, I'm going to keep talking. Welcome to the stream, Phoebe. Well, welcome to the stream, Phoebe. We're trying to convince your ego to join us today.
Of course I was. My ego demanded that I make a pot of tea, not just a cup of pot. So there you go. My ego demanded it.
Okay, so Phoebe was making a cup of tea. And so everyone, this is my special guest today, Phoebe J. Rose. Would you like to introduce yourself to the audience?
Hello, audience. I am Phoebe J. Rose, one half of Phoebe J. Rose and her ego. Just kidding. I am Phoebe J. Rose. I am a football player who plays in goal. I run around like a lunatic. I shout a lot on the internet. And I run a YouTube series called Transition Stories, where student Dr. Ben was my very first interview, and he likes to lord that over everybody, where I interview non-cisgendered people about what gender means to them, transitioning from a gender they have been assigned to whatever gender they have now. And I've had wonderful guests on there, so you should go check that out. Season 2 is coming later this month. I have guests lined up already. Some of them you will know, some of them you won't know. But yes, go subscribe to me because I'm awesome. But stay here first. Subscribe here first if you're not already subscribed.
Also, there's a reason why I'm bringing Phoebe on to help me talk about these personality tests. What is your field of study, Phoebe?
I am somebody who works in social work.
So Phoebe knows a few things about criteria that you should not be using when hiring people and ways you cannot judge people, such as these personality tests. So we're going to talk about this today, but first of all, before we get into our own biases about these personality tests, we're going to take one of them today. So it used to be, I think, the Myers-Briggs used to be the more popular one that people would use. But nowadays, people are online talking about the Enneagram tests, like the one that gives you a number. So Phoebe and I are going to take this test. Before we have our thoughts about what each of these categories means for us as people, because we'll talk about why this subjective view of yourself is kind of not helpful for determining these kind of things. But I'm sure that Phoebe and I would probably get different answers based on what we know about the test. Like if we go into the test not knowing what the options are for outcomes versus taking it after we know what the different categories are. Because that might subject your bias, right? So we're going to take this first to see kind of what we end up with, and then we're going to learn about ourselves and what these numbers mean for us. I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to take a free version of the test because I really don't want to pay $12 per test. So I'm just going to do a cheap free one we found on this weird woo website too, which is kind of funny. It's called Eclectic Energies, and you can learn about chakras and acupressure. So these are the kind of communities that use this Enneagram test. Phoebe, would you like to take it first, or would you like me to take it first?
I'll go first.
Okay,
I'll go first.
So this test has pages with 9 questions or less, 1 for each Enneagram type. You'll get less questions per page after having answered enough questions to establish which types you are not. So I guess you answer the questions and it'll like remove the types that you did not answer correctly for, and it'll narrow it down until you get your type, I guess. So getting accurate results from these Enneagram tests, it is important to answer the questions honestly. Try not to answer them in terms of how you would like to see yourself, but in terms of how you actually are or have tended to be in the past. Those are 2 very different things, aren't they, Phoebe?
They most certainly are. Having been, just a little bit of background about me, having been somebody who was an ethno-nationalist for about half a decade, I'm most certainly not that person today. Having been somebody who was a very religious person for about 30 years, I'm not that person today. And being trans will inevitably and undoubtedly mean that I'm not the person I was before I transitioned to the person I am today. But also, it talks about how you want to perceive yourself and how you're actually perceived. And they can align and they can diverge. And people can perceive you in different ways. But I will perceive myself in a different way than Ben will perceive me. And I will perceive Ben in a different way to other people. And there'll be a number of factors in that. So what they're saying there is, don't be a wanker on the test.
Well, also, it's of course, it's trying to get you to remove as much bias as you can and to go with who you actually are versus how you want to be. But there's a problem in that too, because you don't know yourself perfectly. Like you're saying, you don't have 100% self-awareness. So you might think you're very charismatic, or you might think that you have certain personality traits that you might not actually have, just because you're only seeing yourself from your own bias. You don't know what you don't know about yourself.
The argument, the famous line is, from Donald Rumsfeld, we have things that we know, things that we know that we don't know, and things that we don't know that we don't know. He got ridiculed for that, but that is one of the most accurate statements ever said by any person in human history, because it is true. I know I'm sat here with Ben. I don't know what the result of this test is going to be. And I can't tell you what's going to happen in 3 days' time. Because that's an unknown unknown. The test is a known unknown. And the known known is I'm sat here with Ben.
Yeah. So it just doesn't factor in the variables. It's a very subjective thing. And so you can't really take this as objective truth, no matter what the result is, because I'm answering it from a limited standpoint. So I think let's just get into this thing. So yeah, because
are we doing the classical one or the one with instinctual variant?
We're gonna do the classical one and then see how it is. If there's an energy healing type, okay. Well, we'll get into all. We'll get into all that. This just sounds
that does sound like woo to start with. That really does.
I mean, this is on a page called Eclectic Energies, so it can't really be that scientific.
I do like at the top. It's got chakras, acupuncture, exercises, etc., I-Ching, processing, etc., etc.
Yeah, so this will be great. Let's take this test for Phoebe, and then we'll take it for me. Okay. So at least there's kind of a spectrum, but it's still very like binary answers in that it doesn't give you context for any of these.
So it says, honestly grade each statement yes for yes. This really gets me. Partly for this is partly how I am, and no, this personality is not how I am. If you do not know whether it applies, usually best to check no. And on the screen, no has been pre-checked all the way down. And
so it does not give context for any of these situations. No context.
So the first question says, success, prestige, recognition really matter to me. I've yet to meet a human being where those things don't actually matter to them.
Right.
So the answer has to be a yes to that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have yet to find somebody that says, I want to fail, I want to be unrecognised, and I want nothing of any note ever. I've never encountered a person like that.
Mm-hmm. All right, question number 2. What is your answer?
It's my job.
I love to take care of people and I'm good at it.
I wouldn't be doing my job otherwise. It's like you as a doctor, me as a social worker. We wouldn't be doing our jobs if we didn't genuinely believe that statement to be 100% true.
Question number 3 is just like, this is not a personality. This is not a personality trait.
Now, here's the thing. I have clinical depression. So, I don't get depressed easily. I just get depressed.
Yeah, like, it's not a personality trait. It's a clinical diagnosis.
Yeah. So, for that one, I'm going to have to say no, because it's not something that happens easily. It just happens. I am more selective than most people. Sometimes the world just seems too harsh. Well, again, that is a general statement that could apply to anybody.
Mm-hmm.
So for that one, I'm going to throw the test a little bit and put partly.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it depends on context and it depends on the situation, right?
I tend to trust most people. In a religious context? Absolutely not. If I was in a religious context, no way. I would be very skeptical of the lot of you. You've got to earn that trust. I've had my trust with religious people broken a lot. I'm not going to say I can't trust you or won't trust you. It's just I'm going to be a bit, hang on a sec. But that's not to say that I can't and won't. I trust most people who play football against me on a Sunday not to be the people that are going to want to put me in hospital. Yeah, I can get behind that. So I tend to trust most people is one of those statements. Again, as we said, it needs some context. So again, partly has to be the answer here because I can't say yes and I can't say no.
All right. I want to win the approval of those in authority, sometimes even when I don't really like them.
Go on, ego, take over on this one.
All right, Phoebe Z, go.
The answer is, well, of course I do. I'm the ego that wants to be approved by everybody. I don't care who you are. I want approval. I want love.
Again, I feel like this is something that applies to everybody. I think everybody has these desires, and it depends on context of which authority you're talking about. Sure, most people might be like, yeah, I don't really trust the government authority right now, but we each have authorities in our own lives who, like, we probably want their approval from, like our boss or our parents. Somebody who's been put in charge of us is probably has meaningful input in our lives, at least according to our own brains. Like, we desire feedback, we desire love and attention. So this is not unusual.
You mentioned parents and bosses. We see those as voluntary, or we see those as beneficial, which is why we tend to want the approval of them more. Mm-hmm. Parents, because they have a bond of love between you, which is hardwired into the brain. I'm not going to tread on people's toes here. I'm not a psychologist. I don't have psychological training, but I do understand how that bond works. So you're more likely to trust your parents. Your boss at work, you want their approval even if you can't stand them, because that person can determine A, whether you get a promotion, B, whether you get a pay rise, C, whether you get disciplined, E, whether you're made, D, whether you're made redundant, etc., etc. So you have a benefit out of that. When it comes to the government, some people see that as only a negative interaction. The government take money from you, the government impose rules on you, and the government do things to you. You don't see any of the benefits from the government. So you're more likely to be less trusting of them because you see them in a negative light doing things to you than you would be a parent that has done more positive things for you, which is why it is much more difficult to get people to criticise their parents than it is to get people to criticise the government. People, particularly in a democracy, are much more likely to criticise the government than they are their parents, because they've seen the government as this thing that they can, and it's socially acceptable to rally against and complain about, because the government takes money in taxes, the government imposes rules, the government can lock me up, etc. My parents give me money, my parents gave me a home, my parents fed me, etc., etc. So they were two polar opposites. Yet sometimes criticising the government is not the right thing to do, and sometimes criticising your parents is the right thing to do.
This is a really good point, Mac, and we're actually going to get into that. We're going to get into more about this test, but we got to take it first.
Yes,
so we'll get there.
And we need to make some progress on this.
Yeah, I plan the next adventure before the current one is finished.
Well, of course I do. It's called planning tomorrow.
I often refrain from acting as I'm afraid of being overwhelmed.
That's partly. That can happen in any situation to anybody, myself included, yourself included.
I'm too strict with myself and others. I feel like that's everybody.
Well, of course, but I don't really know what the question says, but yes.
All right. Next page. I could probably use a little more ambition.
We could all do that. So yes, I could always use more ambition.
I'm always aware of what needs to be corrected.
No one is. No one is ever always aware of what needs to be corrected. That's a psychological impossibility.
Yep. I'm pretty domineering, Phoebe.
Be my guest. Be my guest on your show.
Okay, what is your answer though? Are you domineering?
Yes. Yes, of course I'm domineering.
Phoebe's ego's in the room, of course.
It's pushing Ben's ego out the window. Get out. Get out.
In most close relationships, I give more than I take.
Partly. There'll be certain situations where you compromise and you have met your partner, and there'll be certain situations where your partner has met you. So partly.
Okay, this next question, though, is obviously from a very religious standpoint, because they're saying I'm skeptical, suspicious, and doubtful. Like, suspicion and doubt makes it sound like it's a bad thing.
And also, it lumps skeptical in there as well.
Exactly.
It makes questioning things to be a nonsense. But you should always question things.
Yes.
Of course.
For you. Even though this is your test, but I'm going to say yes for you.
Now who's domineering?
Me. Well, I have to take my test too, so I'm probably going to answer yes on the domineering question as well.
Remember, you are a guest on your own show here.
Yeah, okay. Well, is it hard for you to put your feelings aside even to get a job done?
No. I have autism.
It's important to me that I be admired by others, and many people do admire me. That's again, it's something that applies to everybody.
Well, of course. The answer is yes.
Is that a yes? Okay.
It is a yes.
All right. I don't see much point in wallowing in negative emotions. When I begin to feel anxious, I tend to throw myself into distracting activities.
Well, partly. It depends on why.
And I mean, this is kind of poking again at like clinical psychology and like coping mechanisms. Like, that's not a personality. This
feels like it has undertones of Scientology to it.
Yeah, I think Mac in the chat was actually just saying that. Like, this sounds like it's getting you to a religious outcome, and we'll get to that because it's definitely there. It's definitely there. I'm uncomfortable when people want an emotional response from me.
No.
You're a social worker.
Of course. I'm not uncomfortable when people want it. Whether they get it is another matter entirely.
Fair enough. Next page. Your happiness and your feelings are your responsibility, not mine.
Well, partly. If you're being held hostage, then yes, it is your responsibility. If I am a social worker who has parental responsibility for you, then it is mine, not yours.
Context, people. It's easy for me to accept other people, and they seem comfortable around me because I don't judge them.
No, everybody judges everybody, full stop, whether they like to admit it or not.
Yep. Even though it is frequently irrational, I sometimes worry whether people are talking about me behind my back.
Well, of course. Partly true. Because everybody worries about that. I am a true romantic. Well, I personally consider myself a true romantic, and am told by my fiancé that I'm a very romantic person. But whether that's a true romantic, I don't know. But I'm going to say yes, because...
No true Scotsman.
You took the words right out of my mouth.
But I am a true romantic, and you're not a true romantic.
Yes.
I don't mind taking a risk. I really like to beat the odds.
Well, of course, it makes you feel good. Why do people play the lottery?
So that's a yes or partly?
Of course it's a yes.
Okay. I avoid expressing strong emotions.
No. MathPig, are you in the chat?
Is MathPig in the chat? Oh, yeah.
Personal relationships are by far most important thing in my life. Well, no. My own self-survival is the most important thing in my life.
Same for everybody. Yep. Are you more organized than most?
Yes. Despite making tea and waiting for the tea to be made.
For better or worse, I compare myself to others to assess how I'm doing.
Yes. Everybody does this. You drive down the street. You are assessing your driving against other people. When you turn around and say, that person is a bad driver, you are instinctively saying, I am a better driver than that person.
Yeah.
When you turn around and say, oh, messed up there, you're instinctively saying, I'm a worse driver than the person in front of me, or next to me, or behind me, etc. What is this?
All right. I am quite unobtrusive and easy to get along with.
Partly.
Okay.
In this online sphere, I am told I'm quite easy to get along with. In court, nah, I'm a very difficult person to get along with.
Rules annoy me.
Partly.
Depends
Rules annoy everybody. If the rule is, don't murder me, I'm fine with that. If the rule says, don't steal my stuff, I'm fine with that. If the rule says, walk on this yellow line and only this yellow line for the next 15 minutes, that's going to annoy me.
All right. I get bored more easily than most people. I am always looking for new experiences.
Now, to anyone here who has attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, could you please tell me what you think of that question specifically? We'll take it later, but I just want you specifically to give me your thoughts on that statement. Because it sounds like it's part of a DSM criteria.
It does. It really does. So what is your answer?
Well, partly. It depends on what the subject is. If you were to take me to watch Prokofiev, I'd love every second of it and I wouldn't get bored 1 second. If you were to take me underground in a cave, turn off all the lights and run away, of course I'm going to get bored.
Yeah. I want to observe and think without giving myself away before I go into action.
Partly. Sometimes on the football pitch, I want people to know that I'm charging at them.
While I'm very loyal myself, I frequently worry that others are not going to be loyal to me.
Well, again, that's partly because it depends on the person that you're interacting with.
Okay. Yeah. I am more loving than most people.
Well, not knowing most people, I have to put partly because some people I will be more loving than, some people I will be less loving than. It's a very, very odd question, that one.
I'm a good networker. I know how to make connections.
Yes, I'm on this stream with you.
Yeah. I am highly individualistic. Isn't everybody, though?
Yes, of course I am. I'm not a drone, I am not a clone, is one of the things that we like to espouse about ourselves. And of course, I'm British. The last one, you don't need my input for that one. You just know the answer. I'm British.
Yep. All right. Next page. I'm attuned to anything that might be dangerous, and I am security conscious.
We all are. So the answer is yes.
Safety is important. People are attracted to me because I impress them.
We like to think that, so the answer has to be yes.
Yep. I try to get closer to people by being generous with my time and energy.
Again, we like to think that, so the answer has to be yes.
Mm-hmm. I often resent it when I see people doing a slack job.
Again, we like to think this. We do. How many of you in the chat have said, that's a bit of shoddy workmanship? Oh, they've missed a bit over there. Oh, there's a typo there. The answer is, of course, yes.
Yeah. I am more temperamental than most, but it's because my feelings are so strong.
Again, the answer has to be yes, because if you answer any other thing than yes, there may be something more psychologically deep that you need to look into.
I go along with what others want unless I have a very strong desire of my own, which I usually don't.
Well, partly. If we're in a restaurant, it depends. If we're driving down the road and I'm not driving, I'm going to be fine with that. If we're choosing where to eat and I have an allergy to half the things on the menu...
Yeah. So I don't like commitment. Who wants to be locked into something, especially if something better presents itself?
The answer has to be no, I'm an engaged woman. So if I say yes to that, then I've got problems in my personal life.
I come on pretty strong and can sometimes intimidate people.
We all can. The answer for me is, of course I can. But here's the difference. I know I'm doing it, and I'm leaning into it at the moment.
Nobody likes to be intruded upon, but I hate it.
This question, I'm going to just take a couple of minutes here to rant. I'm just going to rant for a couple of minutes. This is one of the worst statements I've seen in the whole of this Enneagram so far. Nobody likes to be intruded. Well, of course nobody likes to be intruded. When was the last time you said to a thief, come on, come into my house, take what you like, and then run away? Of course you're going to hate that. You don't want to have your personal space violated. When you get stopped by a police officer and they start to search you, well, of course you're going to say, I don't like that intrusion and I hate it. When was the last time you said to a police officer, I'm hiding things from you, Mr. Police Officer. The illicit substances are in my left pocket and my purse. Please, please, I'm really liking that you're searching me for these things. This statement is one of the worst statements that I have seen in this entirety of this whole Enneagram, because it takes this person that is an unreasonable, unfathomable, unimaginable person that says, yes, please come and walk all over me. Yes, please come and take all my stuff. Yes, please come and do all of this bad stuff to me. I'm not talking about people who may have an adult bias towards these things being enjoyable for them. That is me getting around the YouTube algorithm to say certain things on this channel without getting Ben a strike. But, of course you're going to hate it. You don't want to be seen as someone that's taken advantage of. Why do people get divorced? Why do people leave people? Why do people get children that are put up for adoption? Because nobody likes to be intruded upon. I see this every day of my life.
This test looks like someone ate the DSM and then barfed.
I see this every day. I am that intruding person. Some people will accept my intrusion because it's about how I do it and how I sell it to them. Some people will tell me and swear at me to get stuffed. This is a question written by somebody that if you put no, or if you put partly, you do not understand A, the question, B, your role in society, or C, you may not have the maturity to understand how things are working. So you could be a child taking this. You could be somebody who has reduced mental capacity taking this. But other than that, if you are somebody that likes to be intruded upon, are you doing this outside of a context which adults like to do and adults like to pay money for?
Yeah, this question's terrible. All right, so let's do the next page.
Rant over.
I'm drawn to emotional intensity and I'm not afraid to explore the depths.
Yes. I am meticulous, tedious,
and
even
fastidious.
We were fighting over the questions now. Fight it.
Two strong egos in the same room, okay?
Okay, from now on, I'm just going to let you read the questions. My ego is going to take a step back and let the guest on this channel read the questions.
I'm meticulous and fastidious, even about details that other people find minor.
Well, yes, I have autism. It's one of my autistic obsessions.
I am competitive and ambitious, but I do not think of myself as cutthroat.
No, I am very cutthroat. I want that job. I want that job. There is one job available. I want that job. If you've ever applied for a job and you think you're going to get it and there's only one position, you're being cutthroat.
Yeah. When making a decision, I often ask myself, which option will yield the maximum enjoyment? Doesn't everyone do that, though?
Well, of course everyone does that. So the answer has to be yes.
If I'm not careful, I get too isolated from others. This sounds like DSM as well.
Partly. Sometimes the isolation can be the end goal.
Mm-hmm.
It's like when I was leaving ethno-nationalism, isolation from them was the goal.
I see life as a struggle that I intend to win.
Of course.
Who doesn't want to win at life? Sometimes I have overextended myself in trying to help people. Haven't we all, though?
Yes. Yes, we have.
Because we're all bad at boundaries. It's important to me to feel as though I belong. This is, again, for everybody. Everybody wants to belong.
The answer is yes. And I know this because I've been part of organised religion. 2 organised religions I've been part of. Been part of ethno-nationalism, and I was part of groups that were to do with that. And so, well, the answer is yes. We all tend to try to find people who are of similar natures to us. Why do people reject the notion of communities of minorities? Because they're intimidated, because their own community doesn't overlap with that community. So why is it when you hear people say there is no such thing as a trans community, get so upset when the trans people say, well, there is a trans community of shared experiences and shared values, even if we're all individuals within that? Everybody likes to think they belong, and those people that are outside of that don't belong.
Do you tend to avoid conflict?
Absolutely not.
All right. To deal with the fear I always have, I am as nice and warm as possible towards everyone.
No.
I welcome a good fight as it clears the air.
Yes, it really does.
No one would ever call me selfish. Well, that's a lie.
I'm being selfish right now. This food that I'm about to consume is a selfish act.
Everyone's selfish. As they should be. There's an appropriate time to be selfish. And that's something, society loves to tell you that being selfish is bad. But there are plenty of reasons why being selfish is okay. This is why we have boundaries. Boundaries is an act of selfishness because it's saying that your health is important. And I'm responsible for my own boundaries and for my own health. And I need to be selfish sometimes. I need to take my own health into my own hands sometimes and tell people, you can't talk to me right now. I don't want to see you. And sometimes people are going to force their way into crossing those boundaries. But society would love to tell you that you're just being selfish and not letting people cross those boundaries. So being selfish is okay a lot of the time. Just don't be selfish to the point where you are hurting somebody else in the process of being selfish. Don't don't make someone else's life miserable to make yourself happy. Like, that's not okay. But for the most part, being selfish is fine.
But also, being selfish in this context that you just said, I have pushed my way in before, with you specifically. And that was me being selfish because I wanted to help you.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a selfish act because I wanted to give the help, even though Ben was saying, look, go away. I knew something was not quite right, and I selfishly pushed my way in, even though Ben said, push, 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 push. And that can have consequences to a relationship, but it can also have consequences in a relationship if you sometimes don't do that. So sometimes being selfish is a necessity because I saw that Ben needed help, and Ben has shown that I've needed help, and in both contexts, we've both told each other, clear off, and both of us have pushed through.
I don't tend to overcommit myself. I have a limited amount of time and energy.
I always overcommit myself.
You always overcommit. I know you do. It would be the worst thing to be seen by others as a loser.
Well, of course, I am not a loser. What do you think the Wheatus song "Teenage Dirtbag" is predicated around?
It's strange, but I think there's something beautiful about sadness.
Yes, sadness is gorgeous. It can be gorgeous.
It's really hard for me to save money as I tend to spend beyond my limits.
Partly. We can all go through phases of I like things, I dislike things.
I hold a tight rein on my temper.
No. And yes. So partly.
Partly. I'm a big procrastinator.
No.
Okay. Next page. I accumulate lots of knowledge to counteract my lack of self-confidence.
Everybody does that. The answer is yes.
I am more sentimental than others. How would you know if you are something like compared to the entire rest of humanity?
Am I more sentimental than the Dalai Lama?
Probably not.
Am I more sentimental than the Queen?
I don't know the Queen.
Well, there you go. The answer has to be partly, because there will be people that I will be more sentimental than and people that I will be less than sentimental than. I
want to be noticed, but it also makes me uncomfortable.
No, I want to be noticed, and I'm quite comfortable with being noticed.
I'm good at getting things done.
Yes.
I'm constantly on the lookout for things that might go wrong.
We all are. The answer is yes.
I think it's weak to back down from confrontation.
Partly.
Depends on context.
If my physical health and well-being is threatened, then yes. If I'm confronting somebody because they want to take away my fundamental right to exist, guess what? I'm not backing down.
I almost never lose control of myself.
Anybody who answers yes to that
has no self-awareness.
Yes, precisely.
If something doesn't go my way, I can find something beneficial about it.
We all can. Whether we choose to do so is a different matter.
Yeah. I'm a brainstormer. For every problem, I can think of 10 approaches to a solution.
We all can. The answer is yes.
Most people don't know that I'm actually really sensitive, as I tend to conceal my emotions. You do not tend to conceal your emotions.
No, I conceal nothing.
It is important to me that I win the respect of others. I'm going to say yes.
Of course.
I know that that's enough of an everybody thing. I don't let it show, but if I'm with someone who is as unique as I am, I get a bit jealous.
Well, partly. Everybody has envy. Everybody has jealousy.
Change, whether to a new job or new school, makes me more anxious than it does most people. So basically asking if you have generalized anxiety.
Or autistic tendencies.
Yeah.
Which, as somebody who has been diagnosed with autistic spectrum disorder, the answer has to be yes.
Okay. Others need my assistance much more than I need theirs. That is very not self-aware.
Well, chat, you know what my occupation is. How can I answer this in any other way other than partly? If somebody can come up with the definition of how I can answer it in any other way than partly, I will advise you to train to do my job.
I'm pretty tough. Phoebe is pretty tough. I'm going to say yes on your behalf.
Thank you.
I can't rest until the job is done.
Well, I do rest, but it's usually involuntary.
So what's your answer for this one?
Well, the answer has to be partly, because
Okay.
because I can sometimes rest until the job's done. But here's the thing with that. You have a deadline. You have a piece of work that needs to be done in 3 weeks' time. Of course I can rest before that job is done. It's 3 weeks away. I have a job that needs to be done in 20 minutes. I'm not going to rest for those 20 minutes.
Yep. Context. All right, next page. I generally appear calm and even-tempered even when I'm under enormous strain.
Partly. Math pick.
I tend not to consider asking help from others, even from those I love.
Partly. There will be some things that I don't want anybody to know. And there'll be some things
I am
that
more dramatic
desperately
than
want.
most. I'm going to answer that as a yes.
See, some of these questions require someone else to answer them for you.
What would you say, though? What would you say, though?
Well, of course I am. I have done stage acting before. I have appeared on television before.
Like, you are a YouTuber. I have compulsion to do things the right way, even if it's not cost effective.
I'm on YouTube. It's not cost effective to be on YouTube.
This is absolutely not. It takes me quite a lot of time and effort to make important decisions, and I frequently second-guess myself.
If you're not second-guessing yourself, you're not conducting yourself in a critical thinking manner. The answer has to be yes.
Okay. I want to enjoy things, so I'm not very disciplined. Why are these mutually exclusive?
Well, the answer has to be partly. Because some things I want to enjoy myself, like sometimes I just want to eat more cake, and that's not being very disciplined. Sometimes I want to go on that 10k run, and that's very disciplined, but I'm going to enjoy every minute of that run.
Yeah, that's context. Like, these are not mutually exclusive. People see me as a warm and sympathetic person.
If people didn't see me as a warm and sympathetic person, I would have been kicked out of my profession a long time ago.
I've been told that I lack tact, but I think the important thing is to tell the truth.
Partly. Sometimes I'm not allowed to tell the truth.
All right, next page. We're almost done.
Just before we carry on, you must get that with that last question as well. You must get that with patient privacy.
Yeah, because we get situations where family might want to know something. Like, well, we don't get to tell everybody everything. Like, there has to be consent in place for who gets told what. So, sorry, some people don't get to know what's going on.
Yeah.
I generally don't like to stay at one task for very long. I get restless and want to move on to something else.
Depends what the task is.
Partly. My tendency is to tell people what's wrong and what they should do about it has sometimes annoyed them.
Again, partly, because some situations you won't do that, some situations you will do that.
Even if I don't have it all together, I'm at least going to seem to have it all together.
We all like to seem, on the surface, the duck on top of the water. Even if underneath we're going... So the answer is yes.
Okay. Life is about give and take, so giving love is the most important thing in my life.
Partly. I can give love to an abuser, but that's ridiculous.
It's not great. I tend to escape reality into a world of idealized fantasy.
We can all do that.
I think everyone does, though.
Partly. Do I tend to do it? I don't know.
People aren't often what they seem, so I can be really suspicious of their motives.
Yes. That is something that happens.
I have more energy and strength than most people. Again, with the most people thing.
It has to be partly. I have less energy than Usain Bolt. I have more energy than a newborn baby.
I'm not comfortable with self-revelation.
I am very comfortable with self-revelation. I'm doing a personality test on YouTube.
I'm really good with big picture, but I don't have much patience with detail work.
That has to be a partly because sometimes when you're doing future planning for yourself and you're looking 5, 10 years down the time, that's big picture. When you're looking at what I'm going to have for dinner tonight, that, my friend, is minutiae.
I think best on my feet, so I tend to move into action before I've thought it through.
Again, context.
I'm proud of the fact that many people depend on me. I feel like you are proud of that.
Yes, I am.
I've been told I'm a perfectionist, and I suppose it's true.
Partly, again.
Sometimes I don't know what I'm feeling until I've had a chance to think about it. I mean, that's
Yes.
true for everybody.
Yeah, it's a generic, vague statement.
A lot of these are very vague. The
Those are
aesthetics
very
of my
generic.
surroundings have a strong influence on my mood. Again, same for everybody, though.
Well, yes, again, vague, generic statement that could apply to anybody. It's like reading astrology, this is.
Yeah. I tend to have mixed feelings about many people. Again, I'll do what it takes to be successful. Yeah, I mean,
Again.
who doesn't want to be successful?
And here's the thing, even if
Everybody
you
wants to be
say,
successful.
I'm not going to do that because it would be too much effort to be successful, you're then lowering what your outcome for success is.
Yeah. Okay, last 2 pages. And then when I do the test, I'm going to just like speed through it and go with like my intuitive answers and see what I get. I have a real sensitivity to how my presentation is affecting others, and I can alter it if I have to.
Partly.
I seldom compromise my principles.
If you compromise them, they're not principles.
So, are you going to say yes?
The answer is no, because if you compromise your principle, I seldom compromise my principle. Yes. See, the question is bizarrely worded there.
Yeah. I can easily imagine all the things that might go wrong as I have a really vivid imagination.
That's called life experience, so yes.
It really bothers me when people don't say thank you.
I'm British.
I don't give a damn about morality, but I've got my own brand of integrity.
Don't understand that, but I'm going to put
They're
partly.
definitely doing an objective morality thing.
It feels very, feels like Ayn Rand would question some of these things and go, what are you talking about?
Yeah. Yeah, since most of us here don't really believe in objective morality, what would you say?
And the question is, are there moral absolutes? Is what that question is getting at. And I personally
Well, I think
believe
it's assuming that there are moral absolutes, but it's whether or not you care about them. So it's forcing you to assume that there's moral absolutes.
I'm going to have to put partly because I don't really understand the question.
When I've arrived, the party starts. So that's a yes. I enjoy remembering the past, even if it's a bit melancholic.
We all do. The answer is yes. Why did people vote for Brexit?
While I value my close relationships, I often feel most myself when I'm alone.
Again, partly. I do.
All right, last page. Last page, let's do it. I tend to either comply completely or to rebel. I mean,
partly.
That's like 2 extremes. When I really get involved in an intellectual problem that stimulates me, I tend to detach from my emotions.
But partly, you can get caught up in the moment.
I secretly fear deprivation and being without the nicer things of life.
Everybody does, yes.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes I wish people would take care of me for a change.
Everybody does, yes.
Yep. Sometimes I'm too critical of others, but I'm much harder on myself than I am on others.
Everybody is, whether they like to admit it or not.
My life has been permeated by a sense of longing.
Everybody's is, whether they like to admit it or not.
I have strong physical appetites.
Everybody would like to think that they do. Whether you do or not is a ableist question.
Mm-hmm.
So the answer for me has to be yes, because I'm a sport mad fitness fanatic.
I'm good at motivating people. Yes, you are.
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Come on.
Ready for your results. You are a type 3. Taking wings into... So there's a wing thing. You have like a secondary score. So you're a 3, wing 4. So remember that. Write that down, because we're going to look at what that means. Do you want? We can just go look at what that means for you before I take mine.
Why don't you do a screen capture of that?
Okay.
And then what we'll do afterwards is we'll side by side yours and mine.
Okay. So I'll do my quiz, and then we will...
You can buy it. You can pay money to buy your complete score.
Yeah, I guess you can. But on the actual thing, like, you have to buy the test too. So, I'm just gonna speed through and see what I get.
I'm gonna talk because I can talk and I enjoy talking. So that test felt very, for me personally here, that test felt very much as though I could have been reading a fortune cookie throughout most of what was being presented to me. And I say that as somebody who is not dismissing fortune cookies or making any connotations about fortune cookies here. It's just the statements in them are astrology statements. They're statements that are generalized, vague, and can be very much fit anybody in any situation. It has a undertone and a feel of cold reading to me, where this sense of you are being genericized to be squished and squashed into this trait of how it's all done is very much how I'm getting the feeling of this. And we need to be very careful when we do things like that, because when you are presented with questions like this, even though the test itself says we want you to be you, etc., 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 what you're actually doing there is you are genericizing yourself, and you are no longer being you. And that is the problem here with this kind of personality test, is because it tries to capture you as part of a whole, it doesn't see nuances. It doesn't see individual quirks, individual issues, which is why when you take a test for a psychiatric diagnosis, for example, you have to have not seen the test before, and you have to not realize you're being tested. And this is one of the biggest issues that a lot of people who engage with psychiatry and psychiatrists, in my professional experience, end up with issues, because I, as a professional, can sometimes see that an individual is displaying traits that have warranted me making a referral. But then they have gone and looked up all of the things that they could potentially have that are issues with them. And then, therefore, they can't take the test, because they're then looking for a diagnosis, whether or not they're doing this looking for a diagnosis in a conscious or subconscious manner. Because it's the Heisenberg effect. The effect of observing a phenomenon affects the outcome of the phenomenon. And what that means is that unless you are having it done to you double blind, and potentially being done in such a way that you don't know about it, there are issues with consent there. There's issues with ethics there. Because is it acceptable to test people without their knowledge? Is it acceptable to conduct a test on somebody who doesn't know that they're being tested? And there are very good reasons why we have these kinds of consent models in place. I'm going to speak from a personal experience here. I went to see a therapist once, and a therapist did a technique on me called immersion. And for those of you who are unaware of the immersion technique, immersion is where you treat somebody for acute onset post-traumatic stress disorder by taking them back to the position that caused the traumatic event in the first place. Now, the problem that I have is when I went to see this therapist, I was not in the acute onset stage of post-traumatic stress disorder. I was in the late stage complex PTSD stage. And what that meant was that when I was taken back to that stage, it wasn't a beneficial experience for me. It was a regressive experience for me. And what that did to me was it caused me to want to go and engage in the destructive and negative behaviors that I had associated with my coping mechanisms for that post-traumatic event. And it put me back on therapy train. It put me back into third class where I was moving into second class. It's a very British analogy, I understand. But it does raise how much consent can you give to somebody to conduct a test like this so that you're not biasing the results, but how much consent should you be given because of the harm that can be caused by that test being conducted without your knowledge. So for me, I've had this test conducted to me. I would not recommend this therapist at all. I would find this therapist to be somebody that is, in my opinion, unfit to practice. And I found the technique and the test to be done in a way that was for shock value and not done in a way that was designed to meet a therapeutic outcome for me as a patient, but was a learning exercise for the therapist. And when you encounter people that are engaging in that kind of testing and treating of people, you have to have informed consent to prevent that from happening. So in the situation that I'm describing, the person should have said, I will be undertaking a range of psychiatric tests. These psychiatric tests may induce the following, and then listed some of them. And then at the end, other outcomes may be present depending on you as a person. But that was not done in this case, and there are reasons why these safeguards exist. Yes, we want to have people that are able to accurately take these tests. Yes, we want these tests to be accurate. I am not saying these tests are accurate in any way, shape, or form, but I'm trying my very best not to bias the good student doctor above us. But if we don't tell people what's being done to them, that is a violation of that person's autonomy. That is a violation of human decency when it comes to understanding and when it comes to good moral and ethical practice. I understand there will be people in the chat that will disagree with that last statement because everybody will have a slightly differing set of moral and ethical values. That's just the nature of who we are. But it's recognizing that we have those individual nuances and have those differences and have those ways of understanding each other means that we will better be able to understand ourselves. What, in my opinion, most people who take a personality test are doing, unless they're doing it for a laugh and a giggle, or they're a bit drunk and they're taking it because they've had far too many, they want to learn a little bit more about themselves. They want to see, well, okay, where do I fit on this scale? And that scale can be something as simple as I want to know if I have tendencies to be an aggressive person, tendencies towards anger, or whether I'm a nice, light and airy fairy butterfly. Everybody wants to learn something about themselves, whether they like it or not, and whether they admit that to themselves or not. You will want to learn things about yourself, but you may not like what you learn, and therefore you may stop going down that path because it is a painful experience for you to actually find out about these things. So when somebody says, you need to sit down and learn about yourself because you're doing these things negatively, and then you react in a way which dismisses that, that is part of you rejecting learning about yourself. It doesn't mean you still don't want to learn about yourself. It's an overriding factor saying, I'm not prepared to go down this route because I don't like X. So it could be a painful experience, like a bereavement in your life that you're not ready to deal with yet. It could be another event. Or you could learn something about yourself from a birthday party where everybody gave you cake, jelly, and ice cream, and you had presents thrown at you, and you were down the bowling alley playing 10-pin bowling all afternoon. You could still learn something about yourself from that situation, and you will be quite happy to embrace the answers of what you're learning there. These personality tests should be taken, in my opinion, with a user guide of your mileage may and will vary. So, I have taken these tests. We're now going to compare our results. And they are, in my opinion, something that is not greatly scientifically reliable. It's a bit of fun.
Yes, your state of mind will change your answers. So it'd be interesting to take this test on a good day versus like a bad day versus, I don't know.
I would like to take this test
versus 5 years from now.
I would like to take this test today, perfectly, wonderfully this, and then potentially on one of my psychotropic prescription medications. See what the differences are.
All right, are we ready for my answers?
Yes, we are.
Okay. I'm apparently a type 6 wing 5. So I'm going to... All right, so now we're going to find out what this means, because I literally just went through and did like impulse answers for most of it. So that's going to be fun.
Well, I hope chat liked my monologue for a few minutes there. I hope that I made sense with what I was saying.
All right, I'm going to stop sharing this screen, and we're going to go to the actual like approved test site for learning about who we are. Okay, so we have the 9 Enneagram type descriptions. So you have to click on it to find out about this. But okay, so you're given like these words, and I feel like it would be more effective if you just took these words, put them all in like a list with checkboxes, and you just go through checkbox the words that describe you and keep it like personalized versus like trying to fit you into this box of like, this is the one thing that you are. Like,
and the other thing is that they have deliberately made these seem more impactful by the way they have written them. They all have a definite article before them.
Yeah, so why do you think people are so obsessed with categories? Like, we see this with these personality tests. We see this with, like, the Harry Potter houses. You see this with, like, what Pokemon are you?
Drag Race.
Yeah, you see this with gender roles. You see this with people just have a desire to be in a category. And I get that there's a sense of belonging that people want to have. Like, they want to have this identity that they can very easily describe to somebody else. Like, this is me. But why do we need these categories? Why can't my category be Ben? Like, my category is me. That is the only category that I need to fit in. And this category may change from day to day because it's me. I'm constantly evolving. Like, I don't need to be in a lumped group with somebody else. I can just be me. So why is that so hard for our psyche to do that? So do you have any thoughts on that?
No, you said it as bad as well as I could have said it myself.
So
there's nothing bad to that. So
okay,
I'm
so let's look at these categories.
4.
Yeah, okay. So we can. So type 1 is the reformer. Type 2 is the helper. Phoebe is type 3, the achiever. Success-oriented, pragmatic type, adaptive, excelling, driven, and image conscious.
I'm a stereotype by the sounds of it.
I mean, all of these are stereotypes, but let's read more about what this means for you. Okay, so type 3 in brief.
4, whatever that means.
Yeah, so I guess type 4 is like your secondary. But so this is telling you who you are, and it's trying to get you to identify with this type of thing, which a lot of this I could see myself being, but I didn't get this type. So you're self-assured, attractive, and charming, ambitious, competent, and energetic. They can also be status conscious and highly driven for advancement. They are diplomatic and poised, but can also be overly concerned with their image and what others think of them. They typically have problems with workaholism and competitiveness. At their best, self-accepting, authentic, everything they seem to be, role models who inspire others. So your basic fear is of being worthless. Your basic desire is to be valuable and worthwhile. With the Enneagram 3 with a 4 wing is the professional. So that's your specific thing.
So let's look at some of the example people that they have lumped me in with. So apparently I'm lumped in with Tiger Woods, wonderful, committed man to relationships there, and O.J. Simpson.
You also get Madonna, though.
Yeah, Madonna, because she was great when
and
she
Lady
was
Gaga.
And Andy Warhol.
This is like a weird mess of people.
So I'm just going to...
Mitt Romney.
And Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Like...
Tony Blair, Bill Clinton, Prince William, apparently. But here's some of the people you wouldn't normally expect. Courtney Cox.
Yeah, so... Here, let's see the levels of... Okay, so I guess with these types, you have 3 levels of development. So there's like healthy levels, and then average levels, and then unhealthy levels. So if Phoebe is at her healthy level, then she's like all self-accepting and like has high self-esteem, energetic, ambitious, that kind of stuff. But then when you're at your unhealthy levels, fearing failure and humiliation, exploitative and opportunistic, covetous of the success of others, willing to do whatever it takes to preserve illusion of their superiority. Well, that's true, though.
I don't have an illusion of superiority. I just have superiority.
Attempting to ruin others' happiness, relentless, obsessive about destroying whatever reminds them of their own shortcomings and failures. Psychopathic behavior. That is a diagnosis.
What? That's an actual DSM diagnosis. So, okay, we're going to stop here. I'm going to let the doctor take over for a second, because why is using that term so problematic?
Because it's an actual diagnosis. Like, people who have psychopathy don't choose to have psychopathy. It's not something that you get to be, and it's not something that makes you a criminal. It does not make you do these horrible things. Like, it's a pathology that you have, and you can get into some situations with how you interact with society, but that's not because necessarily you have this condition. It's just that, like, you have to be able to work with somebody on interacting with society and figuring out how to best fit in as someone who's neurodivergent in a neurotypical world. Like, that's what it comes down to. Like, we make these people seem like villains, but a lot of this is people whose brains work differently trying to fit into a world that asks their brain to work differently than it does. Like, would you say that's a common problem just in general?
Well, yeah. If that wasn't a common problem, I wouldn't have a job.
Yeah, and
my job wouldn't exist.
So it is a problem that they're using this diagnosis to tell people that their personality is unhealthy in a certain way. It's just making something more of a pathology than it needs to be, and it makes people seem like their illness is a sin in a way, and that's a problem.
Which is also not only a problem, but also dangerous, because it can cause people to think that they're excluded from society, so why should they take any measures to conform with societal norms?
So apparently you have addictions, or are prone to certain specific addictions, such as starvation diets and stimulants cocaine, steroids, and
Does it
this last
actually
one,
say cocaine there?
it says cocaine, but also excessive surgery for cosmetic improvement, which these people are mostly Christians who would, of course, say that gender confirming surgery would probably fall under that. They would list that as an addiction.
So apparently, my eating disorder that I had when I was growing up, and is just an addiction of mine.
It's just your personality.
So
yeah.
So my bulimia that I had growing up, which would swing between starvation diets, overeating and purging, starvation diets, overeating and purging. That was just an addiction. Just an addiction.
Yeah, not something that you actually like need help for because it's like a diagnosis or anything.
Just an addiction. Just an
But
addiction.
Also, Bouncing Cow makes a good point in that it's like compatibility with everyone and misidentification with almost everyone. Yeah, you could apparently be misidentified if you were actually literally any of the other categories. So they're admitting that you have a high rate of misidentification of your type. So how accurate even are these?
So here's the thing. It says compatibility with other types. Everyone you are compatible with. Misidentification with other types. All of them except the one that you have.
Yep. So you want to see... we could read your personal growth recommendations.
Please do.
Take breaks.
Please do.
You need to take... That's true, though. But I mean, the stuff is just... This is all stuff that should be applying to everybody. Like, this is all, like, being honest with people, charity and cooperation, like, taking breaks, social awareness. Like, that's all just very general advice that's good for everybody. So it's not anything specific to you. Like, I could benefit from that, too. And we're apparently not the same type, even though I would argue our personalities are probably very similar in a lot of ways.
Now, here's the thing, though. It could be that you're a bloke and I'm a bird, that we've got different types.
Well, yes, okay. But let's look at my type and see what it says about me.
You were
I'm a 6 wing 5. Here, we gotta go back to type descriptions. The loyalist. The committed, security-oriented type, engaging, responsible, anxious, and suspicious. I mean, the committed, secure-oriented type, 6s are reliable, hardworking, responsible, and trustworthy, excellent troubleshooters. They foresee problems and foster cooperation, but can also become defensive, evasive, and anxious, running on stress while complaining about it. That's actually like so true, though.
Yeah, but here's the thing, though.
It's true of everybody.
It could be true for me as well. If you'd read that out to me, that would be exactly the same. It's just that we try to identify patterns that we can see. So we will try to identify with different things so that we can go, that's very nice and that's very nice. So if you have a situation and you were to read 9 different criteria from it, they could all be made to fit round that situation very easily.
Yeah. So yeah, these apply to pretty much everybody. And then I'm a 5 wing, so I'm the defender. So my key motivations are want to have security, to feel supported by others, to have certitude and reassurance, to test the attitudes of others towards them, and to fight against anxiety and insecurity. That's, again, everybody deals with that. So the people that I'm apparently like, I got Freud. Apparently I'm like Freud and Richard Nixon and a lot of people. Frodo Baggins. I am
George H.W. Bush
and Alex Jones. Why?
Diana, Princess of Wales.
How about Alex Jones, Rush Limbaugh, Sigmund Freud?
Here's the thing, though. Also, the Princess of Wales, Lady Di, is on this list.
Yeah.
Sarah Jessica Parker is also on this list, and so is Jay Leno, and so is Ellen.
And Dr. House. This is just
Larry
an interesting
David.
little list. Yeah, this is okay. I mean, this is just all talking about being loyal and also being intelligent and security. So let's see this. Levels of development. So at my healthy levels, I'm self-affirming. This sounds almost exactly the same as the wording that you had.
Oh no, wait, it is the same.
Okay. All right. And then at unhealthy levels, it's like feeling persecuted, that others are out to get them, acute inferiority feelings.
So your level 9 is hysterical, seeking to escape punishment, self-destructive and suicidal, alcoholism, drug overdoses, self-abusing behaviour, generally corresponds to passive-aggressive and paranoid personality disorders, which are
Again, DSM.
which are cluster A and cluster B personalities.
Yeah. Again, making people with like psych disorders feeling like that they're wrong for having a disease that they can't control.
And the thing is, though, when you're dealing with somebody who does have a cluster A or a cluster B personality disorder, or personality type, those people need to be treated, and they need to be treated very well. Because otherwise, serious issues can arise from that. And also, we have the same compatibility.
No, I realize what it is. Those are things to click on to find out your compatibility.
Oh, I'm with you.
So, okay, so let's see how
compatible you and I are supposed to be.
Type 3. So if Phoebe and I were to be in a relationship,
which we're not, despite what the internet might think.
Surprisingly, this is not a common pairing, although these two types can work very well as a team.
See this stream.
I mean, they're both doers, is what it says. 6s offer support to 3s without 3s feeling smothered. 6s also help 3s to become part of something bigger than themselves. A church, a service organization, a political or spiritual group. So I'm going to convert you to a religion.
Just highlight that. Just highlight that section.
My mouse doesn't like to work very well. I don't know. My mouse.
Anyway. But just focus on that for a second.
Yeah.
So, a lot of people who will be watching this live will know that Ben and myself have done one show in common that is hosted by a third person called Neil. So for me, and I'm assuming this is true for you, Ben, to read that stinks to high heaven of red flags. Because what this is, it's not actually a personality test. What this is actually is it is a proselytization tool. This is a tool being used to proselytize. And that is very dangerous. Because these are the same kinds of techniques, and these are the same kinds of methods that are used to radicalize people. You give people an in, and you give people a sense of, I'm bettering myself. And you give people a sense of belonging to something. Whereas if you are using that to try to convert somebody to a specific set of dogmas and a specific way of thinking, that is the very first steps towards radicalizing somebody to becoming something they weren't. So when it turns around and says you could do very well at a church. You could do very well in a spiritualist congregation. This has stopped being a personality test. This has stopped being a bit of fun. This has stopped being something that Ben and I can poke fun at. And what it is actually doing is it is actually modern day missioning through the internet. And it is getting people to engage with it themselves. It's like walking to somebody who was a missionary and saying, please tell me about things that are going on. Please tell me why I should be part of this. And this is no different to that, because it has those subtle undertones of, this is good for you, and this will help you.
All right, so this is kind of a great little segue into the history of the Enneagram and how it came to be. And it's really disgusting. So, the Enneagram of personality types is a modern synthesis of a number of ancient wisdom traditions. But the person who originally put the system together was Oscar Ichazo.
Oscar Ichazo.
I don't speak Spanish. He was born in Bolivia and raised there and in Peru, but as a young man moved to Buenos Aires, Argentina, to learn from the school of inner work he had encountered. Thereafter, he journeyed in Asia, gathering other knowledge before returning to South America to begin putting together a systematic approach to all he had learned. So, it's based on ancient wisdom traditions. And so, after many years of developing his ideas, he created the Erica School as a vehicle for transmitting the knowledge that he had received teaching in Chile in the late 1960s and early 70s before moving to the United States, where he resided until his passing in 2020. I don't really care who you studied with. Let's kind of skim through to where this gets important. So this group spent several weeks learning the basics of his system and engaged in the practices he taught them. The Erica School, like any serious system of inner work, is a vast, interwoven, and sometimes complex body of teachings on psychology, cosmology, metaphysics, spirituality, and so forth, combined with the various practices to bring about transformations of human consciousness. So, there's a lot here.
There are also concepts there that require you to have some faith to begin with. You have to have a faith in spiritualism. You have to have a faith in cosmology to start with. So you are not going after people like Ben and I who have a harder exterior to break through. You're going towards people who have already accepted some of these concepts, and you're just building upon what those people have already accepted.
Yep. It's very predatory.
Yes. Also, we have the tone has shifted quite dramatically in this as well now.
Mm-hmm. Among the highlights for many of the participants was a system of teachings based on the ancient symbol of the Enneagram. The Enneagram symbol has roots in antiquity and can be traced back for at least as far as the works of Pythagoras. The symbol was reintroduced to the modern world by George, I'm not going to pronounce that name, the founder of highly influential Inner Work School. He taught the symbol primarily through a series of sacred dances or movements designed to give the participant a direct, felt sense of the meaning of the symbol and the processes it represents. What he clearly did not teach was a system of types associated with the symbol. He did reveal to advanced students what he called their chief feature. The chief feature is the linchpin of a person's ego structure, the basic characteristic that defines them. He generally used colorful language to describe a person's chief feature, often using the Sufi tradition of telling the person what kind of idiot they were. People could be round idiots, square idiots, subjective hopeless idiots, squirming idiots, and so forth. But he never taught anything about a system of understanding character related to the Enneagram symbol. For these and other reasons, many early Enneagram enthusiasts have mistakenly attributed the system of the 9 types to him or to the Sufis because they have used some of the Sufi techniques. This has led to the widespread and erroneous belief that the Enneagram system has been handed down from the Sufis or from other ancient school as ongoing oral tradition. While it's true that Ichazo drew on this knowledge of a number of traditions, The actual combination of those traditions connected with the Enneagram symbol is purely his creation. Thus, the traditional Enneagram only goes back to the 1960s when Ikazo was first teaching it, although the philosophy behind the Enneagram contains components of mystical Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Taoism, Buddhism, and ancient Greek philosophy, particularly Socrates, Plato, and the Neo-Platonists. All traditions have that stretch back into antiquity. So,
I'm just going to say here, the attack on Sufism, for those of you who are unaware of it, is thinly veiled Islamophobia.
Yep. Yeah,
it's thinly veiled
absolutely.
Islamophobia because Sufism is spiritualism in Islam.
Yep.
And then what it does at the bottom is it says all of these other world religions.
Yes, that is your personality type, Neil, is total idiot. Can we?
Neil,
I kind of want to take these types of idiots and make our own personality types where we're each just a different type of idiot. This actually sounds fantastic. I love this.
It does. But yes, but what it does is it attacks Islam and engages in rampant Islamophobia. And then it pivots and says, but all of these other things are included and they're fine. Judaism, Christianity, etc. They're fine. So if you're one of those things, that's fine for you to have those things as well. So it does a very good job at othering Sufism because it goes into a lot of depth about how negative Sufism is, like total idiot and idiot squared and all that. It even uses the phrase, uses colourful language, which is a very powerful phrase because it allows you as the reader in your own head to input what that colourful language is. So for somebody, it could be as much as they've said some not very nice things, or it could be as much as they're going on a Islamophobic diatribe in their head. And it allows you to view one thing as bad, but I'm okay because I'm discreet.
It kind of roboted a little bit through that, but I think we got the idea.
I do apologise for roboting, but too long.
You're back now.
Well, that's fine. But in short, what it was there was an othering, which in this case was Sufism, which is spiritualism in Islam, and a collectivization of everything else being good, Christianity, Judaism, etc.
Yeah, so let's keep going with this, I guess. This is a whole mess of stuff. I'll skip to kind of what's important. So to grasp the significance of these diagrams and the relationship between them, we must remember that the system was designed primarily to elucidate the relationship between essence and personality or ego. In his own words, we have to distinguish between a man as he is an essence, as he is an ego or personality. In essence, every person is perfect, fearless, and in a loving unity with the entire cosmos. There's no conflict within the person between head, heart, and stomach, or between the person and others. Then something happens. The ego begins to develop, karma accumulates, and there's a transition from objectivity to subjectivity. Man falls from essence into personality. So here we kind of see why in this personality test we had the assumption of objective morality. He's operating here off of the assumption of objective morality and then saying that if you take morality into your own hands, then you're tainting your essence.
And he also talks about things like karma. So what he's saying is that you need to follow a set of rules that abide by making other people give you positivity.
And he's also specifically says that man falls from essence into personality. So your personality is your shortcomings. It is the ways that you do not live up to your essence. So they are kind of using this test kind of the way Scientology does in saying, like, these are your flaws. Now we need to take what you know about your flaws and you need to seek out this religion or this teaching to help you overcome these flaws. that
And
you
don't
probably
you dare
don't
go
actually
anywhere
have.
near a medical professional.
Yeah, like, I mean, you probably have these flaws, but like not to the extent of like not more so than anybody else. Like these are things that everybody might need to work on in their own personal lives, but you don't need a religion to help you get through those. You just need some self-awareness and to just learn about how to interact with the world around you. And you don't need religion to help you do that. And you don't need this personality test necessarily to tell you what areas you need to work on like that. You should be able to figure that out. It's pretty much the same for everybody.
The thing that is most dangerous about these tests is they are used in a way that is mainstream and is highly discriminatory. I have seen tests of this nature in pre-employment assessment centres that I have done. So you're asked to sit down and you're asked to take a test, not necessarily this test, but maybe of a similar test. And you're told at the start there are no right answers, there are no wrong answers, this is all about you. But what that actually does is it just reinforces the biases of A, the test, and B, the person reading the results of the test. And that is where these things are most insidious, because they turn around and say that it is acceptable to A, pathologize people based on what is regular, normal, to be expected behaviors and activities, to hand out diagnoses that should only be handed out by a professional, and C, allow somebody the excuse of getting around anti-discrimination laws to pick who they actually want to hire.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have somebody who is racist and gives these tests out, there will be a racial bias in the results. It's just the way that the tests will come out. And that can be used. Well, I didn't select based on race, I selected based on a personality test.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't select based on gender, I selected based on a personality test. So, whilst you may indirectly think, "Oh, this is fine," what it's actually doing is it's a backdoor to discriminating against people.
Absolutely. So reading more into this nonsense, these ideas found their way from Greece and Asia Minor towards southward through Syria and eventually to Egypt. There it was embraced by early Christian mystics known as the Desert Fathers, who focused on studying the loss of the divine forms in ego consciousness. The particular ways in which these divine forms became distorted came to be known as the 7 deadly sins: anger, pride, envy, avarice, gluttony, lust, and sloth. How the original 9 forms in the course of their travels from Greece to Egypt over the course of a century became reduced to the 7 deadly sins remains a mystery. So they're essentially, we're getting into this point where you can take your personality type and say what your sins are. And now the religion can target you, be like, well, you are a 6. So this is your specific sin that you need to repent for, that we have just revealed to you is your problem. And it was Asia Minor. Yeah, only theologians have I seen actually use that phrase. But Phoebe, I want to let you read the next paragraph. Being someone who's a former Jew, I will let you.
So where would you? So just double click where you'd like me to start from.
This one.
Here we go. I will get on my stage and I will do my very best to say this. Another key influence Ocasio employed in developing these ideas comes from mystical Judaism, and particularly from the teachings that the Kabbalah, central to Kabbalah, is a diagram called Tree of Life. It says Hayam in Hebrew. The Tree of Life is said to be a map showing the particular patterns and laws by which God created the manifest universe. The diagram is composed of 10 spheres, sephirot, connected by 22 paths in particular ways. Most significantly, Icazio must have been aware of the Kabbalistic teachings that all human souls are sparks that arise out of these spheres or emanations from the Kabbalistic tree. The first sphere, Kit, is reserved for the Messiah, leaving 9 other spheres for the rest of us. In the traditional teachings of the Kabbalah, for instance, each of the great patriarchs of the Bible was said to be embodiments of the different spheres of the tree. For this, teachings suggest that there are different kinds of souls, different emanations or facets of the divine unity. I'd also, if Neil, you are still in the chat, I would very much like your input on this as well.
Yeah, Phoebe, I want to know your thoughts on that, because I have no business talking about that paragraph.
Wow. All I can say is, wow. But, wow.
Okay,
There is a lot in there. So, Azat Hayam, wow, taking me back a bit here, because this is nothing but cherry picking Judaism to further this. Nothing but. And it is another way of promoting Judaism as central and positive. Whereas you see earlier we had Sufi, which is Islamic spiritualism, ridiculed and slapped about a bit. Here we have Jewish spiritualism rooted in Judaism. It's fine. Nothing wrong with that. It's great. Which pisses me off. Because, again, that is a form of discrimination against A, Muslims and B, Jews. Because it says that somehow I am a superior person just for being someone who used to follow Judaism. Which is offensive. Because I'm not a superior person just because I used to be Jewish, because I have Jewish heritage. That's offensive to me because it denigrates me as nothing more than my ethnicity and my form of religion. I'm a lot more than that. And the way also, they have...
Because Phoebe is clearly superior to everybody else, not because of those reasons, but because Phoebe is Phoebe.
Precisely. My ego wholeheartedly agrees with you there.
You're going to say something else, but I had to make the ego come.
Well, of course. And my ego recognized that. But I could go into, and I might, on a later date, ask you if you want to sit down and have me go through just how wrong this is from an actual Judaism point of view. I'm happy to do that, but that's a separate video, and it'll probably take about an hour to rip apart how wrong they have got these things.
We can definitely do a part 2 on this, because it sounds like we have a lot to cover here. We'll probably do some more episodes on the Enneagram and other personality tests.
So it says that the tree of life is said to be a map showing the particular patterns and laws in which God created and manifested the universe. So God created the manifest universe.
Mm-hmm.
I could do a whole episode on just that sentence.
So I kind of want to look at this diagram here. So we have...
If you could zoom in on that diagram, that would be lovely.
Yeah, let me...
Oh, here we go.
So we have holy ideas, virtues, fixation, passion, and instincts.
So what it is saying here is that holy ideas are unchangeable. Full stop. They are there, they are innate, they aren't going anywhere, and you can't get rid of them. They are fixed. Which is nonsense, as has been evidenced by a lot of people in the chat. This has been evidenced by both Ben and myself. And it tries to lean in very heavily into these pseudoscientific dialectic phrases. So your fixation, so are you thinking with your head, your heart, or your gut? You're not actually thinking with any of those things. You're just experiencing a physiological reaction based on your previous experiences. But what it does here is it is very reductive. Loss of the holy idea causes characteristic ego fixation. Well, I'm glad somebody has worked out why my ego exists, because I'm no longer a practicing Masochty Jew. Well, there we go. Loss of virtue causes characteristic passion. Loss of my virtue? So is the fact that I'm now carrying out my work as a social worker no longer virtuous? Is Ben no longer virtuous because he's doctoring? It's...
Yes, secular doctoring is bad.
Yeah,
apparently.
Secular social working is bad. And it is very much painting people who do not hold a religion as people who are to be othered, people who are to be shunned, to quote that wonderful JW phrase, and people who are, I'm going to quote another JW phrase, more worldly, and therefore, no thank you. And that is what is most offensive here about this personality test. It's not saying that I am offended. It is deeply offensive because it has superiority running throughout it, and it has discrimination running throughout it. And most people who are coming to this are unlikely to recognize these things. They're just going to say, oh, that's a historic document. And they're not going to engage in this critical skepticism that Ben and I are currently engaged in. And probably most of you that are watching this are engaged in as well. If you're coming to this and you're not engaged in that and you're thinking, wow, then I'm glad that we've helped you. Go, wow. And we hope you're going, wow, what are you doing? Not, wow, this is something amazing and I'm going to follow it.
Yeah, please don't take this video as signs that you should embrace the Enneagram. But let's kind of read into this. Like, how do we get these personality types and what do they mean for this religious organization? So, thus, the passions and ego fixations represent the ways that spiritual qualities become contracted into ego states. There are, according to Kazu's theory, 9 main ways. And I hate that they're using theory so loosely here. 9 main ways that we lose our center and become distorted in our thinking, feeling, and doing, and are thus the 9 ways that we forget our connection with the divine. The passions can also be thought of as our untamed animal nature before it is transformed by contact from higher influences, awareness, and grace. Because of this particular relationship between the higher qualities of the soul and their corresponding ego distortions, a person could, by using presence and awareness to recognize the pattern of their distortion, their characteristic passion and ego fixation, come to recognize the quality of essence that has been obscured. By remembering or contemplating the higher quality, balance could be restored, thus accelerating the person's awareness of themselves as essence. Knowing one's type was a way to direct one's inner work to facilitate the transformative process. Any thoughts before we move on in this?
What that actually does is it unknowingly dismisses the young earth creationism argument. Because what it does say there is we were around and then God said hello to us. Because it says our animalistic instincts were tamed until we had interactions with a higher entity. Words to that effect. So what it is actually saying is that it eliminates a lot of the Old Testament in that
It
one
kind of
sentence.
does, yeah.
So the Old Testament is eliminated in that one sentence. So now it is contradicting itself. Because it says Christianity and Judaism are fine. But if you eliminate the Old Testament, you're eliminating a lot of Judaism, if not all of it. So if you start to eliminate the Old Testament, and you start to eliminate a lot of the elements of the Old Testament, such as the creation of the world by God in 6 days, and he rested on the seventh day, and the creation of Adam, and then the creation of Eve from a rib of Adam, by saying that we had animalistic instincts that were present before contact, it implies that it accepts that the story of the creation in the Garden of Eden and the creation of Adam and the creation of Eve from Adam and the creation in 6 days with the resting on the seventh day, it basically eliminates the book of Genesis. Just in that one fell swoop, it eliminates the book of Genesis. So if Answers in Genesis is watching this, I hope they destroy it too.
The virtues describe the expansive, non-dual qualities of essence experienced in a direct, felt way by the person abiding in their true nature. The virtues are the natural expression of the awakened heart. We do not try to force ourselves to be virtuous. Rather, as we relax and become more present and awake, seeing through the fear and desire of the ego self, these qualities naturally manifest themselves in the human soul. So, assuming we have souls, all essential individual or an essential individual will be in contact with these virtues constantly, simply by living in his body. Only males, no females, no non-binary people, only males. But the subjective individual, the ego, loses touch with these virtues. Then the personality tries to compensate by developing passions. So now it's a compensation. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're getting into like the actual diagram, what this diagram is. The passions represent an underlying emotional response to the reality created by the loss of contact with our essential nature, with the ground of our being, with our true identity as spirit or essence. The underlying hurt, shame, and grief that this loss entails are enormous, and our ego is compelled to come up with a particular way of emotionally coping with the loss. This temporarily effective but ultimately misguided coping strategy is the passion. But because the passion is a distortion of an inherent essential virtue, recognizing the passion can help us restore the virtue. In a related way, the virtue of each type can also be seen as an antidote to its passion and as a focal point for the type's positive traits. By recalling the virtue in a state of presence, the passion can gradually be transformed. The restoration of the virtue and transformation of the passion is an extremely important part of the spiritual use of the Enneagram. The holy ideas represent specific non-dual perspectives of essence, particular ways of knowing and recognizing the unity of being. They are what naturally arises in a clear, quiet mind when a person is present and awake, seeing reality as it actually is. The loss of a holy idea leads to particular ego delusion about the self or reality called the type's ego fixation. Through the ego fixation, the person is trying to restore the balance and freedom of the holy idea, but from the dualistic perspective of ego, cannot. Again, understanding the perspective of our type's holy idea functions as an antidote to the ego fixation. The non-dual perspective of our true nature is restored as we see through particular delusions of our type. So here's the actual Enneagram.
So before we go into the Enneagram,
Yeah.
It's talking about non-dualistic perspectives of essence.
Mm-hmm.
What that is effectively saying is only the Holy Ghost is acceptable. Because that is element 3 of the Christian Trinity. Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Holy Spirit is what it's also known as. So if you have a dualistic purpose of that, you have split the Holy Spirit. So therefore you are diverging from Christianity. So the deeper I go into this, the deeper this is just a recruiting tool for Christianity. So we've already said Islam is bad by attacking Sufism. We've already said that the book of Genesis in the Old Testament should just be eliminated. And now we're saying that if you are spiritually dualistic, you are somehow wrong, and therefore you should go back to a unified spiritualism, just like the Holy Spirit is.
So we have a few different Enneagrams. We have the Enneagram of virtues. We have the Enneagram of passions. The Enneagram of the holy ideas. So I'm kind of... Oh, and the Enneagram of ego fixations.
Well, I thought there was just one, and it was just my name.
So I kind of don't really know what to make of all that. So, I mean, let's go back to how the system works. So now that we know the history, I'm not going to go too much longer, but this is really interesting. I do kind of want to cover where we get these numbers.
There will definitely be a part 2 of this. There will definitely be a part 2 to this.
Oh, definitely. We're going to dive into this further. Okay, so the structure... So you draw a circle, mark 9 equidistant points on its circumference, designate each point by a number from 1 to 9. Okay. The 9 points on the circumference are also connected to each other by inner lines. Note that the points 3, 6, and 9 form an equilateral triangle. The remaining 6 points are connected in the following order. 1 connects with 4, 4 with 2, 2 with 8, 8 with 5, 5 with 7, 7 with 1. These 6 points form an irregular hexagram. And they're going to talk about
where you fall on this irregular hexagram.
Did you want to see it?
I was studying it earlier, and it's one of those things that I see a lot. And whenever I see one of these things, I generally have a lot of suspicion towards it. But let's see what they say about it.
I think it looks like a summoning circle, but they're not going to admit that.
It does.
Anyway.
It does. I can't remember the anime that has a summoning circle in it.
So your basic personality type. From one point of view, the Enneagram can be seen as a set of 9 distinct personality types, with each number on the Enneagram denoting one type. It is common to find a little of yourself in all 9 of the types, although one of them should stand out as being closest to yourself. This is your basic personality type. So I got 6, Phoebe got 3. Everyone emerges from childhood with one of the 9 types dominating their personality, with inborn temperament and other prenatal factors being the main determinants of our type. This is one area where all of the major Enneagram authors agree we are born with a dominant type. So hold on. People are ready to jump on this, but will disagree with trans people existing.
Yeah, and they'll disagree with gay people existing.
Yeah. Subsequently, this inborn orientation largely determines the ways in which we learn to adapt to our early childhood environment. It also seems to lead to certain unconscious orientations toward our parental figures. But why is this so? We still do not know. In any case, by the time children are 4 or 5 years old, their consciousness has developed sufficiently to have separate sense of self. Although their identity is still very fluid, at this age, children begin to establish themselves and find ways of fitting into the world on their own. Thus, the overall orientation of our personality reflects the totality of all childhood factors, including genetics, that influenced its development. Okay. So, I guess I'll go into the points that can be made about the basic type. So, number 1, people do not change from one basic personality type to another. So, you cannot evolve in your personality.
So, 2, what it's saying is you're an arsehole for life.
You're an asshole for life, yep. The descriptions of the personality types are universal and apply equally to males and females, since no type is inherently masculine or feminine. Non-binary people don't exist, apparently. Not everything in the description of your basic type will apply to you all the time, because you fluctuate constantly among the healthy, average, and unhealthy traits that make up your personality type. So you don't change between personality types, but you fluctuate. So you're fluid, but you're not fluid. You are...
You're like water stuck in a tube that moves around within the tube, but you can't exit the tube.
You're like oobleck. You're like that thing that's fluid sometimes and solid other times. That is what you are. You are simultaneously solid and fluid.
Oobleck. I like that.
I am an oobleck. The Enneagram uses numbers to designate each of the types Because numbers are value neutral, they imply the whole ranges of attitudes and behaviors of each type without specifying anything either positive or negative. Unlike labels used in psychiatry, numbers provide an unbiased shorthand way of indicating a lot about a person without being pejorative. This entire system is pejorative. I don't know what they're talking about.
Pejorative up the wazoo.
Like, that's the entire thing. The numerical ranking of the types is not significant. A larger number is no better than a smaller number. It is not better to be a 9 than a 2 because a 9 is a bigger number. Dang it, I was hoping to be superior to Phoebe because I'm a higher number.
You were hoping to be twice as good as me, weren't you?
Yeah. Dang it, my superiority complex is having problems.
My inferiority complex has now disappeared.
No type is inherently better or worse than another. While all personality types have unique assets and liabilities, some types may be considered to be more desirable than others in any given culture or group. Furthermore, for one reason or another, you may not be happy being a particular type. As you learn more about the types, however, you will see that just as each has its unique assets, each has unique liabilities. The ideal is to become your best self, not to imitate the assets of another type. So we are all equally assholes.
And those of us who engage in masking or behaviors to blend in are inherently incorrect or wrong.
Yes, and also, we all have great things, we all have bad things, but we all need to correct ourselves because we're all sinful and need Jesus.
Yeah, basically. Because
no one is exempt from needing to join this religion.
Because what we have worked out is that this is very heavily on the Abrahamic religions. And it has already dismissed Islam by attacking Sufism. It has already attacked Judaism by saying, well, it was okay up to this point. And then it has eliminated effectively the first book of the Old Testament. So now we're getting into how much more Christianity can we shoehorn in here without sounding like we're Christians.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we have this Enneagram, and you can see what each of these words are for the different types. So I'm the loyalist, and Phoebe is the achiever.
So does that mean if you add you and me together, we get the peacemaker?
I guess.
Well, we're both in the military, and is that a form of peacemaking?
Yes. I don't know. Like, all this is just, like, you could put yourself into any of these categories easily. So here we have one-word descriptors for the traits. So, like, again, I would much rather have a checklist where you could just go down the list and be like, I like this word. This word describes me. This word describes, and actually make you an individual on this spectrum of traits. Because, like, in psychology, traits are useful, and that makes sense. Like, we are a sum of a lot of different traits, and we are all very different in terms of degree of how we express these traits. So traits can be useful in psychology, but I think it's the problem of having these set categories based on very specific traits. Like, I could identify with a couple of these words for mine, but, like, not necessarily all of the words. Like, I don't think I'm suspicious, but I'm skeptical. Like, being skeptical isn't being suspicious.
Like, I don't think I'm image conscious. I don't think I'm image conscious. I do think I'm driven, and I do think I'm adaptable. But then I can also think that I'm possessive, and I can also think that I'm principled.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to read out Ben's, and then Ben's going to read out mine. So according to this, Ben is engaging, responsible, anxious, and suspicious.
And Phoebe is adaptable, excelling, driven, and image conscious.
So what they are doing here, and it's quite clear from a speech writing theory point of view, is that they have two sets of phrasing which are set together. Principled, purposeful, generous, demonstrative, receptive, reassuring. And those are your positive traits. Then you have your other two set, which are your negative traits. self-absorbed, temperamental, secretive, isolated, anxious, suspicious, people-pleasing, possessive. And that is another technique that is used to sell you something. If you hear Joe Biden give a speech, his speech will be littered with things like this because he is one of those people that does that very, very well. Donald Trump does it very well as well. So when you hear a Donald Trump thing, he speaks to the audience like they're great, and then he'll go and attack somebody. Joe Biden will turn around and say that he's been doing these great things, and then he'll go around and say, well, my opponents have been doing these not great things. They are two people who are excellent at this kind of dichotomy in their speech, and it is there to sell themselves to their base.
Yep. So we have the centers. The Enneagram is a 3x3 arrangement of 9 personality types in the 3 centers. There are 3 types in the instinctive center, 3 in the feeling center, and 3 in the thinking center. Each center consists of 3 personality types that have in common the assets and liabilities of that centers. For example, personality type 4 has unique strengths and liabilities involving its feelings, which is why it is in the feeling center. Likewise, 8's assets and liabilities involve its relationship to its instinctual drives, which is why it's in the instinctive center, and so forth for all 9 personality types. So Phoebe's in the feeling center and I'm in the thinking center. Because we all know that men are logical and women are not. So that's just kidding. I don't believe that.
Here's another thing. If we had taken this test 10 years ago, the pair of us, if we're taking this test for the pair of us, say 15 years ago, before you transitioned, would we have flipped that on its head and I would have been a 6 and you would have been a 3?
Maybe, I don't know. But apparently this doesn't apply to gender, so...
Well, there you go. It doesn't apply to genders because it only applies to sex.
Yeah, sex-based rights. It's a sex... My Enneagram is a sex-based right. Okay.
If somebody clips that out.
All right. It's something they would say, too. The inclusion of each type in its center is not arbitrary. Each type results from a particular relationship with a cluster of issues that characterize that center. Most simply, these issues revolve around a powerful, largely unconscious, emotional response to the loss of contact with the core of the self. In the instinctive center, the emotion is anger or rage. In the feeling center, the emotion is shame. And in the thinking center, it is fear. Of course, all 9 types contain all 3 of these emotions, but in each center, the personalities of the types are particularly affected by that center's emotional theme. So.
Wow.
This got really heavy.
That got really heavy really quickly.
Yes.
So, what I would like to say is that I have a clinical diagnosis of acrophobia. So, I'm assuming you know what acrophobia is, Ben.
Mm.
But for those of you in the chat that don't know what acrophobia is, it is a clinical fear of heights. I have it as well. This is not vertigo or anything. This is a clinical fear of heights. And according to this Enneagram, it's all rooted in shame. It's just shame. Nothing about that, but shame. Nothing to do with me genuinely being fearful in an irrational manner that heights are something that are dangerous to me. It's all shameful. So, again, what it is doing is it is being very reductive. And it is saying, well, okay, you fit neatly in here, but we've got to get out claws because you're going to have elements of other things as well. But it's all based in shame. Or it's all based in fear. Or it's all based in anger or rage. Which, if you notice, leans very heavily onto the 7 deadly sins as well.
Yep. And the next paragraph kind of goes along with that. Thus, each type has a particular way of coping with the dominant emotion of its center. We can briefly see what this means by examining each type center by center. In the instinctive center, 8s act out their anger and instinctual energies. In other words, when 8s feel anger building in them, they immediately respond to it in some physical way raising their voices, moving more forcefully. Others can clearly see that 8s are angry because they give themselves permission to express their anger physically. 9s deny their anger and instinctual energies as if to say, what anger? I'm not a person who gets angry. 9s are the type most out of touch with their anger and instinctual energies, often feeling threatened by them. Of course, 9s get angry like everyone else, but try to stay out of their darker feelings by focusing on idealizations of their relationships in their world. So I see they're definitely taking something here with the 8s and 9s and being like, 8s, you suck. 9s are great because 9s ignore their emotions. Do you kind of get the energy from that?
I get a lot from that. I do. I get a lot from that. What he's saying is that you are the product of who you are, and who you are is not a product of anything else. Does that make sense to people?
Yeah. So here we have another dichotomy. We have 1s attempt to control or repress their anger and instinctual energy. They feel they must stay in control of themselves, especially of their instinctual impulses and angry feelings at all times. They would like to direct these energies according to the dictates of their highly developed inner critic, the superego, the source of their strictures on themselves and others. In the feeling center, 2s attempt to control their shame by getting other people to like them and think of them as good people. They also want to convince themselves that they are good, loving people by focusing on their positive feelings for others while repressing their negative feelings, such as anger and resentment, and not being appreciated enough. As long as 2s can get positive emotional responses from others, they feel wanted and are able to control feelings of shame. And then 3s, so Phoebe, tries to deny their shame and are potentially the most out of touch with their feelings of inadequacy. 3s learn to cope with shame by trying to become what they believe a valuable, successful person is like. Thus, 3s learn to perform well, to be acceptable, even outstanding, and are often driven relentlessly in their pursuit of success as a way of staving off feelings of shame and fears of failure. What do you think about that, Phoebe?
It's a wow moment, is all I can say.
Any truth to it, or is it just awful?
Well, of course, there's kernels of truth that flow throughout this, and there's kernels of nonsense that flow throughout this. Do I have feelings of shame and fears of failure? But don't we all have a fear of failure? Don't we all experience shame? Yeah. I would go into something saying, I'm going in this to fail. Unless, of course, it was like somebody was paying me to go in to deliberately fail something. And then again, the failing of what I'm doing is not the failure. The failure is actually the success in that situation. Because I'm actually getting a reward for failure. Nobody goes in to fail at things. But everybody has a fear of failing at things. People who take a bung or a bribe or a backhander or line their own pockets and then throw something like a tennis match, football match, wrestling match, etc. They may have been seen as failing, but that's not a failure because they have succeeded because they've done what they set out to do. Even in losing, so say I go out tomorrow and I play football and I get thumped 14-0. And I walk off the pitch and go, that was a success because I played really well. If I was to turn up there and it was a 0-0 draw and I missed 16 penalties because I was hitting it over the bar and couldn't shoot a barn door, that would be a fear of me failing, and that's a fear that I would have. And everybody has that. Because if we all went in there and didn't have a fear of failure, we would never want to succeed at anything.
And we'd never try. We'd never work for anything. Yeah. If you're always successful, why work?
Yeah, precisely. Why bother?
So 4s attempt to control their shame by focusing on how unique and special their particular talents, feelings, and personal characteristics are. 4s highlight their individuality and creativity as a way of dealing with their shameful feelings, although 4s are the type most likely to succumb to feelings of inadequacy. 4s also manage their shame by cultivating a rich, romantic fantasy life in which they do not have to deal with whatever in their life seems drab or uninteresting to them. So I want to learn more about myself. So let's go to the thinking center.
Hey, Purple's got it right in the chat. So just to jump in here, Purple has it exactly right in the chat. Purple's most recent comment is absolutely correct.
Yeah, if you played football and lost the game, that'll be a success That could be a success if you had placed a big bet on the opposing team. Yeah. Definitions of success. All right, I want to learn about the thinking center because this is going to tell me about my life and who I am. So in the thinking center, 5s have a fear about the outer world and their capacity to cope with it. Thus, they cope with their fear by withdrawing from the world. 5s become secretive, isolated loners who use their minds to penetrate into the nature of the world. 5s hope that eventually, as they understand reality on their own terms, they will be able to rejoin the world and participate in it, but they never feel they know enough to participate with total confidence. Instead, they involve themselves with increasingly complex inner worlds. So I want to just now, not spend too much time on that and go to me, because I'm a 6. 6s exhibit the most fear of all 3 types. I do. Okay. Largely expressed as anxiety. I don't deal a lot with generalized anxiety anymore, but I do have a history of generalized anxiety disorder.
But here's the thing, I have a history of generalized anxiety disorder as well.
And you're not in this one.
No. I'm in the success-driven one. Fear of failure.
Yeah. Largely experienced as anxiety, which causes them to be the most out of touch with their own sense of inner knowing and confidence. Unlike 5s, 6s have trouble trusting their own minds, so they are constantly looking outside themselves for something to make them feel sure of themselves. They might turn to philosophies, beliefs, relationships, jobs, savings, authorities, or any combination of the above. But no matter how many security structures they create, 6s still feel doubtful and anxious. They may even begin to doubt the very people and beliefs they have turned to for reassurance. 6s may also respond to their fear and anxiety by impulsively confronting it, defying their fear in the effort to be free of it. This isn't unique to me. This is just something that I think everybody struggles with. If you desire success at all, yeah, of course you're going to have some anxiety about it. And people desire stability in their lives. I don't go into the world hoping that, I'm going to not know where I'm going to live tomorrow, or not know what I'm going to eat next, or not know if I'm going to be able to see my family or what. Stability is important for everybody. And it's not overly anxious to want to create things in your life that you know are going to be stable. I think we all try to do that. But I think maybe they're trying to take this in a religious stance of, well, your religion, your spirituality is, if that's in place, then you're already secure, so you don't need to worry about, the earthly things that would make you secure because you're already secure.
I say what it's pointing at the Bible. It's pointing quite hard at the Bible. It's going, the Bible is a stable document. Follow the Bible, you have a stable document. It's what it's doing.
Exactly. So then we can read about the 7s really quickly. 7s have fear about their inner world. There are feelings of pain, loss, deprivation, and general anxiety that 7s would like to stay clear of as much as possible. To cope with these feelings, 7s keep their mind occupied with exciting possibilities and options as long as they have something stimulating to anticipate. 7s feel like they can distract themselves from their fears. 7s in most cases do not stop merely at thinking about these options. However, as much as possible, they attempt to actually do as many of their options as they can. Thus, 7s can be found staying on the go, pursuing one experience after another, and keeping themselves entertained and engaged with their many ideas and activities. So we don't care a whole lot about 7s because neither one of us is that. But let's learn about...
Here's a question. Where are 8s and 9s?
They were in the... we did those.
Oh, yes, earlier. They were right at the very top. That's right. Which is...
So I kind of want... because we still have a lot left of this, and I don't want to take up everybody's Saturday because I know other people are streaming right now, and I need to eat something soon. So maybe we're going to pick this up on a different week. We can cover more of the Enneagram. We can also do an episode on the Myers-Briggs because I know that's a popular one as well. But this is a really interesting...
Have we accidentally started a series here?
We accidentally started a series here. We did. So, in the chat, I'm curious. In the chat, if you know your Enneagram type, put your Enneagram in the chat, and we'll make fun of each other. It'll be great.
Please put your type and your wing, because we want to know which wing you are too.
Yeah, put that.
The thing that gets me is I look at the sidebar.
Yeah.
I look at the sidebar. We have not even got halfway through this yet.
Yeah, so we're not going to finish this today, but actually I kind of want people in the chat, if you want to take your Enneagram and find out what type you are, and then next time we can talk about like what these types are supposed to be and stuff and get into that nitty gritty and kind of laugh at it. I'll put a link in. Yeah, I hate that I'm putting this link in the chat, but you can. I literally Googled like the actual test, but here's the link to the information, and I can. If you go to my, yeah, don't pay for their test. Just look for a free one. But I'm also going to put my link to my Discord. I can put these links in the Discord as well, because I have a Discord now. I want everybody to join my Discord. It's just for fun. You can invite people as well. Anyone you want to invite is allowed. Just don't be an asshole. If you are an asshole in the Discord, I will boot you.
He has a very nice set of army boots that he can boot you using.
Yes, I can boot you with that. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and just kind of real quick, what is our, like, if we debrief about this, what are our thoughts about what just happened and what we just experienced?
What we just experienced, we experienced proselytization by stealth is what we experienced there. And it was Christianity that was being proselytized towards us by stealth, because it quite happily eliminated Islam to start with by going after Sufism. It quite happily eliminated Judaism, even though it said that there were roots in Judaism, and it quite happily promoted Christianity, and it quite happily promoted the idea of Christians that follow the spiritual teachings of the Holy Spirit as one of the Christian Trinity. So what we did just experience there was a very classic technique of people who engage in ways of indoctrinating people and ways of going about getting people to think about things in the way that they won't normally have thought about things. But what they're actually doing is they're feeding you a very specific line. So they've already started it off by going Sufism, which is spirituality in Islam, and then it brings you into Judaism, and it goes, oh yes, there's Judaism here, but it also couples it with Greek mythology, and it couples it with Christianity and other kinds of religions and other ancient spiritual practices. And then it gradually comes down, and then it slowly dismisses the parts of Judaism it doesn't like and says, well, we've evolved beyond that, and we're now the more mature version of that, which is actually Christianity. So we've now moved beyond that Judaism, and now we're focusing on Christianity, and we'd like you to do the same. So you'd do very well in a church or congregation, not in a synagogue or congregation, or in a mosque or a congregation. It specifically says the word church, which is a very Christian-specific way of following a religion. And it does that in very subtle ways. It drops it in here, it drops it in here, it drops it in here, and it then pulls out that bit and pulls out that bit. So what it's doing is it's molding the person who is reading it, molding the person who is listening to it to go, oh, that makes a lot of sense to me. Where can I find out more? You can find out more in this book. It's called The Bible. And that's what we've just been going through. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what it comes down to. So, lastly, Phoebe, do you have anything coming up that you would like to shill out to the audience?
So, season 2 of Transition Stories is coming soon. Hopefully, sometime next week, I will have my first guest on. That was supposed to be earlier today, but one thing led to another, and we couldn't quite make it happen. I also have started a new podcast with the tall, friendly atheist dad called Let's Save the Governor General, where I talk about Australian politics with an actual Australian from a very British point of view. we don't just talk about politics, we talk about how we like to beat each other at cricket, how we like to beat each other at rugby, and just how much banter you can get in a podcast between an Aussie and, as he puts it, a bloody pommy cow. So those are the things that I've got in my life at the moment, and what I will say is that I'm going to shill quite heavily that I'll be back on this channel. We'll be doing more of this, and we will be destroying more and more of this.
Yep.
And
so
if you are in the atheist world, stay tuned, because you will see me pop up in a certain place that I'm very proud to actually get on. I won't say what it is, because I can't say what it is because it's not 100% confirmed yet, but I'm going to be popping up somewhere that I've been looking forward to for a very long time with other people who are pranksters like myself. So there's going to be people that are going to be on an atheist product that is going to be an awful lot of fun for me, and I hope that you all can turn up to it. And when I'm allowed to say what it is and when it is, then I'll be pushing it.
It'll be a great announcement. But anyway, thank you all for joining us today. Go follow all of Phoebe's nonsense on the internet. I love her to pieces. And
I love
join my Discord. And I'll put up my intro while we close out. But I hope to see you all in the next one.
Thank you for staying with